At the very moment you're watching this video, the president of the Russian Federation is nobody knows where. He might be in Krasnodar in an underground bunker, or maybe in Valdai in a fortress surrounded by 12 air defense systems. Or maybe he's in Sochi in an identical copy of his Moscow office. And maybe this isn't a conspiracy theory. What you see on TV was recorded 3 weeks ago. Today I'll tell you where Putin really is right now, who he's most afraid of, and who, according to my information, is most likely to become his successor. I'll give you a specific name, and why all of this, my friends, is actually good news for freedom. Let's go.
The most influential person in Russia is becoming less and less visible, and the reasons for this are causing serious concern around the world. In recent months, numerous reports from the Financial Times and other sources have pointed to noticeable changes in the working style of Russian President Vladimir Putin. He is running the country not from luxurious offices or public podiums, but reportedly from underground bunkers.
Today's topic is delicate and important, so I rely only on serious sources. Investigations by Russian iStories, the Financial Times, Project, and Radio Liberty. No rumors, no leaks, no secret insiders. And I promise I will name the specific person who could become the next master of the Kremlin, a name that is rarely mentioned in the Western press, but in Moscow it's whispered more and more often. If you care about serious analysis, then subscribe and hit the bell. Well, let's move on. Where is Putin now? What do we know for sure? Yes, this material is based on sources from European intelligence and from Putin's inner circle. Putin has been working from a bunker in Krasnodar for several weeks now. During his absence, pre-recorded messages are broadcast. Addresses, messages, appeals. Cooks, security guards, and photographers are strictly forbidden to use public transportation. They are driven in private cars. Electronic devices are prohibited in the presence of the big boss. Why? Since March 2026, the Federal Protective Service has sharply increased security measures, and near Moscow there are FSO posts set up to intercept drones. The Krasnodar bunker is not the only one. He has a system of shelters. Gentlemen, let me remind you that the Russian word for shelter comes from the same root as to run away. A shelter is a place people run to. It's a place where people hide. The Latin equivalent is refugium, which means salvation through escape. Why does Putin think he needs to save himself? They always say that the best defense is a good offense, and the best protection is to attack. What happened to Putin? Why is he no longer attacking but hiding? Could this somehow be related to Maduro's unexpected capture in Venezuela, or to the absolutely astonishing successes of American technology against Russian air defenses? Novo Ogaryovo, 20 kilometers from Moscow, the main residence, and underneath it there's an underground command complex designed to withstand a nuclear strike. Ha ha ha. Designed to withstand a nuclear strike, just like in Tehran, but that didn't save Ayatollah. Valdai, 250 hectares Novgorod region, a 4-story palace, and of course nearby is Alina Kabayeva's mansion. Mansion, little mansion, a key detail discovered from satellite images. 12 Panzer S-1 systems, Panzer S-1 around Valdai. For comparison, there are 60 of them in all of Moscow and the Moscow region, including the Moscow region. In Moscow, the Panzer systems protect 20 million people. That means one Panzer protects 333,000 residents of Moscow in the Moscow region, and 12 Panzers protect one, but a much more important person. His name is Vovka Markovka. He's a short guy and a terrible coward. Sochi, residence. Bosharov Rushi. With a nuclear bunker. Of course, with a nuclear bunker. Now there are 2 nuclear bunkers for one valuable person. He's a little runt. Krasnodar. Well, where has he gone now? Between these shelters, he moves in such a way that no one, well, except for American intelligence and a small circle, knows his location at any given moment. Triple offices. And here's a detail that was discovered simultaneously by Project and Radio Liberty. This was at the end of 25. In his 3 residences, Novo Ogaryovo, Sochi, and Valdai, identical copies of his office were built. When you see Putin at his desk, you don't know where he is. Journalists have actually learned to distinguish the copies by microscopic details: the position of the door handle, the seam on the wallpaper, the placement of the lamp, some little spots here and there. Why have 3 identical offices? So that satellites, enemies, and conspirators can't determine where in the country he is. And that leads to a second amusing question. Not just 3 offices, there might even be 3 Putins simultaneously in different offices. And is it possible that one decision is made by one Putin, another by the second Putin, and the third by Kabaeva? The topic of doubles is controversial, of course. Serious experts avoid it, but there are facts. Russian politician and political technologist Sergei Markov, back in 2020, I think, yes, publicly said that Putin has 2 or 3 doubles. Damn, I can't remember exactly. Well, fine, 2 or 3 doubles. Visual analysts have repeatedly noted differences in the shape of the ears, in the walk, in the jawline, well, at different public appearances. Ears, by the way, are the hardest feature to fake. It's very easy with the mind. The Kremlin has never categorically denied it, only mockery. Well, maybe the one answering these questions isn't the real Peskov, but a double of Peskov, or maybe even a triple of Peskov who doesn't know at all what to say. And he just pretends that he's joking. Meanwhile, the real Peskov is secretly visiting his villas in Italy, where no one lets him in under his own passport. They're both vacationing there with Solovyov, who got terribly upset. After buying 3 villas in different parts of Italy, all on his salary, of course, and a bit from his wife's savings, he can't go there anymore. Now he has to lock himself in the bathroom and quietly tell the truth. And then, after telling himself that those who say he never tells the truth are lying, he goes back to Moscow. I'm not saying this for certain, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't actually been in the bathroom with Solovyov. I'm saying the facts don't rule it out, and triple offices mean this scenario has been prepared for at the infrastructure level. Infrastructurally prepared. We do remember how Putin, who actually speaks German quite well, unexpectedly met with Merkel. Unexpectedly. It wasn't planned. They were passing by each other in a hall, and from a distance, so to speak, she said something to him. He was absolutely confused when she said something in German. The interpreter rushed over to him, trying to whisper something in his ear. For a second, there was a look of stunned surprise on Merkel's face, and then an understanding smile. It was also, of course, funny during the signing of the Mutual Support and Protection Agreement with those 6 former Soviet republics. Supposedly, instead of signing, Putin slammed, while sitting at the table, he just slammed, what's it called? The stamp. There, it's called a facsimile. Yes, hiding it with both hands from the journalists, to which the Armenian president Pashinyan, who at that time was not yet experienced in diplomacy, reacted with a nervous laugh and then became terribly embarrassed. He supposedly took a photo of Putin's signature on the document, and then for 2 or 3 years he didn't smile even once. The external threat is not the main one. Now, why all this and what is it for? The official version is that the drones are from Ukraine, and that is, well, probably partially true. In 2025, a Ukrainian drone struck a luxury residential building, somewhere about 56 kilometers from the Kremlin, yes, 5 days before the victory parade. It was not the first strike, but it wasn't the last either. Naturally, but if you look closely at the security measures, it becomes clear that they are aimed not only or even primarily at an external threat. The ban on public transport is most likely not because of drones. Yes, it's to prevent poisoning. The ban on electronic devices in the presence of Putin, yes, that's not because of missiles. It's to prevent eavesdropping and targeting from the inside. 3 identical offices so that none of his own people know where he is. This isn't because of the thief. This is about foreign intelligence. This is about internal betrayal. My friends, this is the main rule of Russian history. The Tsar in Russia was almost never killed by foreigners. The Tsar in Russia was usually killed by his own people. Well, after all, Caesars were also stabbed by their own Brutus. Pavel I was strangled by officers of his own guard in his own bedroom. Alexander II died from a bomb thrown by the Narodnaya Volya, but they only got close because the security somehow failed. Nikolai II was shot by his own people. Stalin, according to the most credible accounts, was poisoned by Beria. Khrushchev was removed by his comrades. Gorbachev was deceived by his own circle. Putin knows this law. Even if he hasn't read any other books, he has memorized this book called How Tyrants and Madmen Are Killed by Their Own. And the main threat to him today is not Ukraine, not the West, not St. Petersburg. And the main threat is the elite he has nurtured. The Prigozhin lesson. And this elite has already shown its fangs. June of 23, Prigozhin's mutiny, Wagner's column. In just 2 days, they got to, how much was it? Only 200 kilometers from Moscow. No regular army stopped them. No one even tried. It was Lukashenko's call that stopped them. We don't know what was said, but Lukashenko's call stopped them. Putin broke his promise of immunity exactly 2 months later and arranged for the plane crash. But the lesson remained. Here's the lesson. If a determined man with 25,000 armed followers takes the risk, Moscow won't defend Putin. Every Kremlin general, every FSB officer, every oligarch knows this now. What? Technically, it's possible. Psychologically, it's already done, meaning there's a precedent, and Putin knows this too. Successor. And now, the promised name. In the Western press, they usually speculate and mention 3 candidates. Mikhail Mishustin, a technocratic prime minister, Nikolai Patrushev, an old KGB man, and Dmitry Medvedev. Well, in my opinion, that's nonsense, but he's loyal but compromised. He's an alcoholic, he's this and that, and so on and so forth. Unlikely. But nevertheless, he's mentioned. I believe that none of them is the main candidate. The main one is named Alexei Gennadievich Dyumin. And who is that, you may ask? I've already talked about him once. Former personal bodyguard of Putin, former head of the Presidential Security Service within the FSO, former Deputy Minister of Defense, former governor of the Tula region, and since 1924, Secretary of the State Council. That is, a position overseeing, well, all of the country's regional policy. He's young, 53 years old, a military man, an athlete, and most importantly, his personal loyalty to Putin is higher than that of any other member of the elite. Dyumin owes his entire career to Putin. He has no independent power base. He is not part of the security clans of Patrushev or Sechin. He is a personal confidant. This is exactly the same model by which the trio under Yeltsin chose Putin in 1999, young, loyal, without his own clan, tied to his patron. If Putin gets the opportunity to choose a successor, then my prediction is Dyumin. If he doesn't get that opportunity, then the collective regime will try to keep the system through Patrushev Sr. There's also Patrushev Jr. as the figurehead, and Mishustin, let's say, as the public face. And that means a struggle between clans for real power. But the first scenario, Dyumin, is preferable for Putin. Well, and for all of his, I don't know what to call it, family, team, collective, cooperative, God knows. And now the most interesting question. Does Putin know about all the problems in his inner circle? And the answer, the rather frightening answer, is yes. I'm going to try to prove it now. Not entirely. According to iStories Project and also Western analysts, Putin receives intelligence reports from 3 people, mainly from Patrushev, from Nikolai. Open sources, television, and the internet are not shown to him, only prepared reports. Prigozhin's rebellion was known to the FSB a month in advance. He was warned. Putin didn't believe it. He was told everything was under control. The main mistake of the war in 2022 was underestimating Ukraine. Overestimating their own army, because no one wanted to tell him the truth. All reports go through a filter. They say what the boss wants to hear. In fact, this is an ancient disease of autocracy. The stronger the autocrat, the worse informed he is. Subordinates are afraid to bring bad news. Everyone is afraid of being blamed for that news. You know how they say, they kill the messenger. As a result, the ruler in the bunker lives in an information vacuum. He is surrounded by reassuring reports. Everything is perfectly fine. Berdyaev wrote about this in Istakov. In The Origins and Meaning of Russian Communism, the autocrat becomes the first victim of his own autocracy. He stops seeing the country. He only sees what they show him. Who is Putin afraid of? Who is Putin afraid of? But not Zelensky or Trump. Not even European sanctions. According to all available data, Putin is afraid of his own people, specifically Nikolai Platonovich Patrushev. The elder, former FSB director, former secretary of the Security Council, he's 74 years old. An ideologue, and what you would call a hardliner. It's like those from Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. Patrushev is the only person in the system who has real power independent of Putin. He built his own network in the FSB. He is the chief architect of the war, and critically, he is even tougher than Putin. He thinks Putin is too soft. If there is a shift in the system, it will most likely be Patrushev. By shift, I mean a coup, of course. It doesn't necessarily mean it will be that kind of coup, more like a change in the system. Not as a conspirator in the classic sense, but as someone who will tell the elite, okay, Vovka can't handle it anymore. We need a transition. And probably no one or almost no one will say a word. That's exactly why Putin keeps Dyumin close. Dyumin is a counterbalance to Patrushev. Young, loyal military. If anything happens from Putin's point of view, he will protect Putin even from Patrushev. And here, my friends, I want to pause. Berdyaev wrote, "A tyrant is most afraid of his own system, not freedom, not the people, not the enemy. His own, because he raised his own, created them, he knows them, and since he knows them, he fears them. And he taught his own the path to power, the paths they can now take, and they themselves are against him. By the way, a bunker is not strength, a bunker is fear. It's the end, not the peak. All Russian rulers who went into a bunker disappeared from history within a few years. A ruler in a bunker is a ruler who has already lost the country. He may still keep formal control for a few more years. He may still sign decrees, but he no longer governs. He doesn't see, he doesn't hear. He is surrounded by people who lie. Not because they want to deceive him, but because they are afraid for themselves. They see their own careers as more important than whatever happens to Russia. And every day that Putin spends in Krasnodar, in Valdai, in copies of his own office, is a day that Russia drifts a little further away from him, by another centimeter, by another half a meter, by another kilometer. The bureaucracy is learning to function without him. The elite is learning to negotiate. Over his head, regional authorities are learning to make decisions without seeking approval. The system itself is learning to live, or let's say to live after Putin. Is there life after Putin? Yes, there is. Because Putin is already leaving it physically and psychologically, he is leaving on his own. And this, my friends, is the best news that can come from this place, which is not even an empire anymore, but some kind of cesspool of evil. Because a system that is learning to live without him is a system that might stop fighting as soon as he is gone. Because they will blame everything on him. It was him, it was him. We had nothing to do with it. We always kept a hidden sign of defiance in our pocket, to be fair, but it was always there. This is a system that can return to the conversation about peace. Bunkers in Russian history have always meant one thing: a change of era. And this change, no matter what it is, bloody or on the contrary, smiling, with Swan Lake or tanks in the streets near Russia's White House or the Kremlin, yes, it is getting closer every day. With every day spent in the dungeons of Krasnodar, it is getting closer. Thank you for watching until the end. If you found this program helpful, go ahead and hit like. That is, nowadays Russian speakers like to use foreign words, so go ahead and hit like. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell if you haven't yet. And be sure to share this video. This has been Leon Weinstein. See you next time. And history, ladies and gentlemen, is on our side.